You know how they say your best friend slept with your boyfriend, so you moved into her dream apartment with her ex? Well, that's exactly what fucking happened to me, and honestly, I'm still processing the beautiful chaos of it all. The discovery hit me like a freight train made of pure betrayal and stupidity. Picture this, I'm scrolling through Instagram at 2 a.m. because sleep is apparently for people who don't have trust issues, and there it is. A story post from some mutual acquaintance's account. Just a casual group photo from what looks like a house party I definitely wasn't invited to. But here's the thing about betrayal. Your brain becomes this twisted detective, zooming in on details you wish you could unsee. There's Jake, my boyfriend of 2 years, with his arm wrapped around someone. Not just anyone. Mia, my best friend since college, my maid of honor at my sister's wedding. The girl who held my hair back when I had food poisoning last month. The way his hand rested on her lower back wasn't friendly. It was possessive, intimate. The kind of touch that screams, "We've been doing this for a while and we're getting sloppy about hiding it." My chest felt like someone had reached inside and started squeezing my lungs with icy fingers. You know that feeling when you're on a roller coaster and it drops suddenly? That stomach in your throat sensation? Except this one didn't stop. It just kept falling, and I realized I was holding my breath like that would somehow make what I was seeing less real. I screenshot the image with shaking fingers. Evidence, my brain whispered. You need evidence, and then I did what any rational person would do. I cyberstalked the absolute shit out of both of them. Jake's Instagram suddenly made horrifying sense. That selfie from 2 weeks ago where he looked unusually happy? Posted 20 minutes after Mia had shared a location tag from the same coffee shop. The hiking photo from last weekend when he said he was going with work friends? Mia had posted a nature shot the same day, same mountain trail, same fucking timestamp. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped my phone. The room felt like it was tilting sideways, and I had to grip the edge of my nightstand to steady myself. Everything in my apartment, the couch we'd picked out together, the framed photo of Mia and me from Vegas, the spare key Jake had left on my counter, all of it suddenly felt contaminated. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall and watch it shatter into 1,000 pieces, each one reflecting back my own stupidity. Instead, I just sat there in the dark, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest entirely. The worst part wasn't even the cheating itself. It was the timeline my brain was frantically reconstructing. How long had this been going on? How many times had Mia sat across from me at brunch, listening to me worry about Jake being distant lately, nodding sympathetically while she knew exactly why he was pulling away? How many times had Jake kissed me goodbye while thinking about her? I remember feeling this wave of nausea roll through me, hot and acidic. My mouth tasted like copper, and my vision got this weird tunnel effect like I was looking through a kaleidoscope. The betrayal wasn't just from Jake. I'd expected men to disappoint me eventually. That's just statistical probability. But Mia? Mia, who knew about my mom's affair and how it destroyed my parents' marriage. Mia, who'd held me while I cried about my trust issues and promised she'd never let anyone hurt me like that. Mia, who knew exactly which buttons to push to completely demolish me. I spent the next 3 hours doing what I can only describe as grief scrolling, going through months of their social media posts, text conversations, shared friend interactions, building this horrifying timeline of deception that painted me as the world's most oblivious girlfriend and friend. There was the night 3 months ago when Jake said he had to work late, and Mia canceled our movie night because she wasn't feeling well. Both of them posted Instagram stories the next morning, looking suspiciously well-rested and glowy. There was the surprise birthday party they'd both insisted on planning for me together, probably the perfect cover for secret planning sessions that had nothing to do with party logistics. By sunrise, I felt like I'd been turned inside out. My eyes were burning from staring at screens and crying, and my throat felt raw even though I hadn't made a sound. I kept thinking about all those times I'd gushed to Mia about how lucky I felt to have Jake, how I was starting to think he might be the one. She'd just smiled and nodded and made all the right supportive noises while fucking him behind my back. The anger started creeping in around hour 4, mixing with the devastation like oil and water. It would surge up in these hot flashes that made my skin feel too tight, then recede back into this hollow, aching numbness. I'd never felt rage like this before. It was physical, making my jaw clench and my fists curl involuntarily. I found myself pacing around my apartment like a caged animal, picking up random objects and setting them down harder than necessary. The sound of my coffee mug hitting the counter too forcefully became this weird outlet for the violence I felt building inside me. What made it worse was imagining them together, not just sexually, though that mental image was its own special kind of torture, but imagining them laughing about how easy it was to fool me. Maybe comparing notes about my quirks and insecurities. Maybe Mia had told him about that time I admitted I was self-conscious about my stomach, or how I always got anxious about whether people actually liked me or just tolerated me. The betrayal felt like it had retroactively poisoned every good memory I had with both of them. That weekend getaway Jake and I took to the mountains? I'd spent the whole time texting Mia about how perfect everything was. Had she been with him before that trip? After? Had my happiness been the punchline to some private joke between them? Around 6 a.m., exhaustion finally started winning over adrenaline. I felt wrung out, like every emotion had been squeezed from my body, and I was just this empty shell sitting in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by the debris of my former life. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It gives you a really solid foundation to build your comeback on. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. Confrontation was what they'd expect from me, and the last thing I wanted was to be predictable. No, I was going to sit with this information for a while. Let it marinate. Let it transform from this raw, bleeding wound into something sharper and more useful. Because as I sat there watching the sun come up through my bedroom window, casting light on a life that would never look the same again, I realized something that cut through the devastation like a knife through butter. They'd given me something incredibly valuable without meaning to. They'd shown me exactly who they really were, and they had no idea I knew. That kind of information? That was power, and I was going to figure out exactly how to use it. The next few days passed in this weird, suspended animation where I functioned like a completely normal person on the surface, while my brain worked overtime in the background, processing and plotting. I went to work, answered emails, made small talk with coworkers about weekend plans. But underneath it all, there was this constant hum of calculation running through my mind like background music I couldn't turn off. Jake texted me that Tuesday morning with his usual "Good morning, beautiful" message, and I stared at those words until they stopped looking like language and just became shapes on a screen. The casual intimacy of it, the assumption that he could still call me beautiful while actively betraying me, made my coffee taste like ash in my mouth. But I texted back with a heart emoji anyway, because the last thing I wanted was to tip him off that anything had changed. This was when I started realizing that revenge isn't actually about anger. Not really. Anger is too hot, too immediate. It makes you sloppy. What I was feeling now was something colder and more patient. It was like my fury had crystallized into this sharp, clear focus that let me see everything with painful precision. I found myself studying Jake differently when he came over that night. The way he kissed me hello felt performative now, like he was checking a box on some mental to-do list. His hands on my waist were the same hands that had been touching her, and I had to concentrate on not flinching away from him. Instead, I watched him. Really watched him. The slight guilt that flickered across his face when I asked about his day. The way he kept checking his phone and then quickly putting it face down when he caught me looking. He was nervous. Good. He should be. The weird thing about knowing someone is lying to you is how obvious all their tells become once you're looking for them. Jake had always been a terrible liar. It's actually one of the things I'd found endearing about him before. Now I could see every micro-expression, every pause before he answered questions about where he'd been or who he'd seen. It was almost insulting how little effort he was putting into the deception. But it was Mia who really fascinated me during this phase. She called me Wednesday evening, her voice bright and chatty like nothing had changed. She wanted to know if I wanted to grab drinks Friday night, catch up on each other's weeks. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Here she was, actively fucking my boyfriend, and she still wanted our regular girl time. Still wanted to play the supportive best friend role. I said yes, of course, because I was learning that information is currency, and I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. That's when I started really digging into their lives, but not in the desperate, frantic way I'd been doing that first night. This was methodical. Strategic. I was building a comprehensive understanding of their world so I could figure out exactly where to apply pressure for maximum impact. See, most people don't really understand their enemies. They just react emotionally and hope for the best. But I've always been good at research. It's literally what I do for a living as a marketing analyst. I know how to find patterns, identify weaknesses, build detailed profiles of target demographics. Turns out those skills transfer beautifully to revenge planning. I started with Mia because she was the more complex puzzle. Jake was pretty transparent. He wanted what he couldn't have, got bored with what he could have, classic commitment-phobic man-child behavior. But Mia had been playing a much longer, more sophisticated game. Going through our text history with fresh eyes was like reading a masterclass in manipulation. She'd been so fucking clever about it. Never directly pumping me for information about Jake, but always steering conversations toward relationships. Always ready with just the right amount of sympathy when I mentioned feeling insecure or worried about something. Always volunteering to be the supportive friend who'd help me figure things out. I remembered this conversation from about 6 months ago where I'd been worried that Jake seemed distant, and Mia had suggested maybe he was just stressed about work. She'd been so understanding, so quick to offer alternative explanations for his behavior. At the time, I'd felt grateful for her perspective. Now I realized she'd been protecting her own interests while positioning herself as my trusted advisor. The psychological sophistication of it was almost impressive. She'd managed to maintain her role as my closest confidant while systematically undermining my relationship from the inside. Every piece of advice she'd given me had been designed to make me more insecure, more dependent on her validation, more likely to overlook red flags. But here's where Mia had made her critical error. She'd gotten cocky. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers, but she'd forgotten that I knew all her pieces and how they moved. I'd been feeding her information about my life for years, telling her my dreams, my fears, my insecurities. She knew exactly how to hurt me, but she'd also given me exactly what I needed to hurt her back. See, Mia had this thing about control. She needed to be the main character in every story, the one with the perfect life that everyone else envied. Her Instagram was this carefully curated showcase of achievements and experiences, each post designed to generate maximum social proof. She measured her worth in likes, comments, and other people's jealousy. And her biggest source of pride? Her upcoming move to this incredible loft apartment in the trendy part of downtown. She'd been talking about this place for months, showing me photos, describing the exposed brick walls and the floor-to-ceiling windows and the rooftop garden. It was her dream apartment, the physical manifestation of everything she wanted her life to represent. The apartment she was moving into with her boyfriend, David. David, who I'd met exactly 3 times and who seemed like a decent enough guy. David, who had no idea his girlfriend was cheating on him with my boyfriend. David, who worked in tech and made good money and had been planning this move with Mia for 6 months. That's when the plan started forming in my mind, crystallizing like sugar in a super-saturated solution. It was beautiful in its simplicity, and it would hurt her in exactly the way she'd hurt me, by destroying the life she'd been building while making her watch someone else step into her place. I started researching David. Not in a creepy way, just basic social media reconnaissance. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, building a profile of who he was, what he cared about, what his weaknesses might be. He seemed genuine, maybe a little naive about relationships, the kind of person who'd assume the best about people until given concrete evidence otherwise. The more I learned about David, the more I liked him. And the more I realized that Mia was going to destroy him the same way she was destroying me, she was just going to wait until after the move when it would be more convenient for her. She was using him for his financial stability and his emotional support while fucking my boyfriend on the side. David deserved to know the truth. But more than that, David deserved better than Mia. I spent hours walking around my neighborhood during this planning phase, my mind spinning through possibilities and contingencies. The physical movement helped me think, and I needed to burn off some of the nervous energy that came with carrying this secret. Every step on the sidewalk was like a beat in the rhythm of my plotting. The beautiful thing about my plan was how it would solve multiple problems at once. Mia would lose her dream apartment and her relationship. Jake would lose his side piece and probably end up alone when the whole mess came to light. David would escape from a relationship with someone who was actively betraying him. And me? I'd get front row seats to watch it all burn down while probably making a new friend in the process. But I needed to be careful about timing. Too fast and I'd seem vindictive. Too slow, and they might move into that apartment together, making everything more complicated. I had about 3 weeks before their move-in date, which gave me just enough time to execute this properly. The first step was getting to know David better. Not in a manipulative way. I genuinely wanted to understand who he was and what he needed to know. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I started showing up at places where he'd be. David had this routine, I'd learned from his Instagram posts, where he went to this specific coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday morning before work. It was a small place, the kind where you'd naturally end up in conversation with other regulars. So I became a regular. It took 2 weeks of carefully timed coffee runs before we actually talked. I'd positioned myself as just another person in line, another face in the morning rush. But when he dropped his wallet and I helped him pick up the scattered cards, we started chatting about the insane morning rush, then about work, then about life in general. David was exactly what I'd hoped he'd be: genuine, funny, a little awkward in an endearing way. He talked about his girlfriend with real affection, mentioned how excited they were about their upcoming move. The guilt I felt wasn't about what I was planning to do to Mia. She'd earned every bit of fallout coming her way. The guilt was about what this was going to do to David, at least initially. But as we talked more over the following days, I realized something that made me feel better about the whole situation. David was already sensing something was off with Mia. He didn't say it directly, but there were little comments about her being distracted lately, less present in their conversations. He was the kind of person who'd been making excuses for her behavior because he loved her, but part of him already knew something wasn't right. I wasn't going to destroy a happy relationship. I was going to save someone from a relationship built on lies. The logistics of my plan were surprisingly straightforward. I had photos of Jake and Mia together from that Instagram story, plus several more I'd managed to collect from other people's social media over the past few weeks. I had timestamps that would let David piece together a timeline of the betrayal. And most importantly, I had David's trust. Because here's what Mia had forgotten in all her scheming. I'm actually pretty fucking likable when I want to be. I'm funny, I'm smart, and I'm genuinely interested in other people. David enjoyed talking to me. We had good conversations about books and movies and the kind of random stuff that makes people feel connected. By the time I was ready to show him the evidence, we'd developed a real friendship. Which meant when I told him I had something difficult to share with him, he was going to listen. And when he realized what Mia had been doing, he was going to be just as angry as I was. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and Mia might be able to manipulate her way out of it or convince David I was lying. Too late, and they'd already be moved in together. But there was this sweet spot about a week before their move-in date where David would have just enough time to process everything and make the necessary changes. As that date approached, I found myself feeling this strange sense of calm. Not the fake calm I'd been maintaining for weeks while pretending everything was normal, but genuine peace. Because I knew exactly what I was going to do, and I knew it was going to work. The night before I planned to talk to David, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about justice and consequences, and the difference between revenge and accountability. What I was doing wasn't just about making Mia and Jake pay for what they'd done to me. It was about making sure their actions had real consequences, the kind that would force them to confront who they really were. Mia thought she could have everything. My boyfriend, her dream apartment, everyone's admiration and sympathy. She thought she was smart enough to juggle all these deceptions without anyone getting hurt except me, and she thought I was too naive and trusting to ever figure it out. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been about all of that. Tomorrow, David was going to see those photos. Tomorrow, he was going to understand exactly who he'd been planning to build a life with. And tomorrow, Mia's carefully constructed world was going to start collapsing in the most beautiful, poetic way possible. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face for the first time in weeks. I met David at our usual coffee shop that Thursday morning, but instead of our normal table by the window, I suggested we sit in the back corner where we'd have more privacy. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free, but my hands were steady as I ordered my latte. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward for 3 weeks. David looked relaxed, chatting about some project at work, completely unaware that his entire life was about to pivot on its axis. I let him talk for a few minutes, partly because I needed to work up the nerve, and partly because I wanted to memorize this version of him, the version who still believed in his relationship, who still trusted the person he was planning to move in with in 6 days. When there was a natural pause in the conversation, I took a deep breath that tasted like coffee and impending chaos. David, I need to talk to you about something, and it's going to be really difficult to hear. The change in his expression was immediate. His smile faded, and I watched his shoulders tense as his brain started running through possibilities. The way his coffee cup paused halfway to his lips told me he was already bracing for impact. "Is everything okay?" His voice had that careful quality people use when they sense bad news coming but don't want to invite it in too quickly. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling just slightly as I navigated to the folder where I'd saved all the evidence. 3 weeks of careful documentation, timestamps cross-referenced, a timeline that painted a picture so clear it couldn't be denied or explained away. "I'm going to show you some photos, and I need you to know that I'm not showing them to you to hurt you. I'm showing them because you deserve to know the truth before you make any major life decisions." The look on his face was breaking my heart already, and I hadn't even shown him anything yet. This was the worst part of the whole plan, knowing I was about to cause pain to someone who didn't deserve it. But the alternative was letting him move in with someone who was actively betraying him, and that felt crueler in the long run. I turned my phone toward him and watched his eyes focus on the screen. The first photo was the one that had started everything, Jake and Mia at that party, his hand on her lower back, both of them looking guilty and intimate and completely unaware they were being photographed. David stared at the image for what felt like an eternity. I could see his brain working, trying to process what he was seeing, maybe hoping there was some innocent explanation that would make this all make sense. His voice cracked slightly. "This is Mia and your boyfriend. His name is Jake." And yes, that's them. I swiped to the next photo, then the next. A timeline of betrayal documented in social media posts and stolen moments. These were all taken over the past few months. I have timestamps if you want to see them. I watched David's face cycle through emotions like a time-lapse video of grief. Confusion, denial, recognition, anger, hurt, all of it playing out in the space of maybe 30 seconds. His coffee sat forgotten as he scrolled through the evidence I'd compiled, his jaw getting tighter with each new revelation. "How long have you known?" His voice was quiet, controlled in that way that meant he was holding back something much bigger. "About 3 weeks. I found out the same way you're finding out now, stumbled across it on social media and then started paying closer attention." I paused, letting him process. "I'm sorry. I know this is horrible timing with the move and everything, but I couldn't let you sign a lease with someone who's been lying to you." David set my phone down carefully, like it might explode if he handled it too roughly. He was staring at the table, and I could practically see him rewinding through recent interactions with Mia, looking for signs he'd missed. The way his mouth tightened told me he was finding them. "She's been different lately. Distracted. Always on her phone?" He looked up at me, and the betrayal in his eyes was so raw it made my chest ache. I thought maybe she was stressed about the move. I was trying to be understanding. "I'm sorry," I said again, because what else was there to say? "I know this is awful." He laughed, but it was this bitter sound that had nothing to do with humor. "You know what the fucked up part is?" I actually had this weird feeling something was off, but I talked myself out of it. Told myself I was being paranoid and insecure. He shook his head. Turns out my instincts were right. We sat in silence for a moment while he processed everything. I could see him working through the implications, not just the cheating, but the move, the shared lease they'd already signed, the life they'd been planning together. The logistics of betrayal are almost as devastating as the emotional impact. "What are you going to do?" I asked gently. David's jaw tightened, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw real anger flash across his face. "I'm going to confront her. Tonight. And then I'm going to figure out what the hell to do about this apartment situation." That was my opening. The moment I'd been building toward for 3 weeks. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "I might have a solution for the apartment situation." He looked at me curiously, and I could see him trying to figure out where I was going with this. "I'm assuming you don't want to live with her after this, and I'm definitely not staying with Jake. But you've already signed the lease, right? And it's a really nice place from what you've told me." Understanding started dawning in his eyes. I'm suggesting that instead of losing your deposit and your dream apartment, maybe you find a different roommate. Someone who actually respects you and won't fuck your girlfriend behind your back." The smile that spread across his face was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It was the smile of someone who'd just realized they weren't going to be the victim in this story after all. "You want to move in with me instead of her? I want us both to get something good out of this shitty situation." You get to keep the apartment you've been excited about, I get to move out of a place that's contaminated with memories of being lied to, and Mia gets to figure out what it's like when her actions have actual consequences. David was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him turning the idea over in his mind, testing it from different angles, looking for problems or complications. "She's going to lose her mind," he said finally, and the satisfaction in his voice told me he was already warming to the plan. "Completely. And she'll deserve every second of it." "When were you thinking?" "Well, you're supposed to move in on Saturday. What if we stick to that timeline but with a slightly different casting situation?" The grin that spread across David's face was pure vindication. "I like the way you think." We spent the next hour planning logistics. David would confront Mia that night, tell her he knew about Jake and that their relationship was over. He'd make it clear that he was keeping the apartment. His name was on the lease anyway, and he'd put down the deposit. I'd start packing immediately and be ready to move in over the weekend as planned. The beauty of it was how perfectly it would hurt her. Mia had been so excited about this apartment, posting photos of the building, talking about her upcoming new chapter. She'd been counting on using David's stability and income to fund her lifestyle while fucking my boyfriend on the side. Now she'd lose the apartment, the boyfriend, and the financial security all at once while watching someone else step into the life she'd been planning. That evening, I sat in my living room pretending to read while actually just staring at my phone, waiting for the explosion. David had texted me around 7 p.m. to say he was heading over to Mia's place. I'd wished him luck and told him to call me if he needed anything. The call came at 9:47 p.m. "How did it go?" I answered on the first ring. "Jesus Christ." David's voice was shaky, amped up on adrenaline. "She fucking lost it. Complete meltdown. Crying, screaming, trying to convince me the photos were taken out of context." "Out of context?" I couldn't help laughing. "What context makes it okay to be all over someone else's boyfriend?" "That's exactly what I asked her." She tried to say they were just friends, that Jake was helping her through some personal stuff, that the photos made it look worse than it was. David's voice was getting stronger as he talked, like reliving it was helping him process his anger. So I asked her to call Jake right then and there, put him on speaker, and explain to both of us what kind of personal stuff required him to have his hands all over her. Oh shit. Did she do it? Of course not. She started crying harder and saying I was being cruel and unreasonable. Then she tried to turn it around and make it about how I was being manipulated by some jealous psycho, her words, not mine. The fact that Mia had called me a jealous psycho when she was the one who'd been systematically destroying my relationship for months was so perfectly on brand for her that I actually laughed out loud. "Did you tell her about the apartment situation?" "Saved that for last." After she'd finished her performance and realized I wasn't buying any of it, I told her she wouldn't be moving in on Saturday, that I was keeping the place and finding a new roommate. How did she take that? About as well as you'd expect. More screaming, some threats about legal action, demands to know who I was replacing her with. I didn't tell her it was you. Figured I'd let that be a surprise. The anticipation of Mia's reaction when she found out it was me moving into her dream apartment was almost too delicious to bear. She'd realized that not only had her plan backfired spectacularly, but that I'd orchestrated the whole thing. That I'd been 10 steps ahead of her from the moment I discovered her betrayal. "What about Jake?" I asked. I told her she should probably call him and figure out their next move, since they clearly had something going on. Last I saw, she was frantically texting someone, probably him. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Jake's name lit up the screen, and I felt this surge of cold satisfaction. "Speaking of Jake," I told David, "he's calling me right now. Good luck. I'll text you tomorrow about move-in logistics." I let Jake's call go to voicemail, then listened to the message with a smile that probably would have scared small children. His voice was panicked, stumbling over words as he tried to explain that there had been some kind of misunderstanding, and that Mia's boyfriend had gotten the wrong idea about their friendship. He needed to see me right away to explain everything. I didn't call him back. Instead, I started packing. The next 3 days passed in this surreal bubble of anticipation and preparation. Jake called and texted constantly, each message more desperate than the last. First, he tried explaining, then apologizing, then bargaining, then getting angry when I didn't respond. The evolution of his messages was like watching someone go through the stages of grief in fast forward. Mia, meanwhile, had apparently started calling our mutual friends to tell them her side of the story. I knew this because several people reached out to me with variations of, "Hey, I heard you and Mia are fighting about some guy. What's going on?" I kept my responses brief and neutral, just said we'd had a falling out and I was taking some space to figure things out. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather, sunny and crisp, the kind of day that makes you feel like the universe is aligned in your favor. David picked me up at 10 a.m. with a moving truck, and we spent the day transporting my life from one apartment to another. From the place where I'd been systematically lied to and betrayed, to a space that represented a fresh start and a perfectly executed revenge. The apartment was even more beautiful than David had described. Exposed brick walls, huge windows that flooded the space with light, hardwood floors that gleamed like they were welcoming us home. As we carried boxes up the stairs, I felt this sense of rightness settling into my bones. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about building something better from the wreckage of what I'd lost. Around 3 p.m., we were taking a break on the couch, surrounded by boxes but finally starting to see the shape of our new living situation, when David's phone buzzed. "It's Mia," he said, showing me the screen. "She's asking if she can come by to pick up some things she left here." The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. She'd probably been driving by the building all day, working up the courage to see who had replaced her, or maybe she still thought she could talk David into changing his mind. "Tell her yes," I said. "I want to see her face when she realizes who's living in her dream apartment." David grinned and typed back a response. 20 minutes later, we heard footsteps on the stairs, followed by the sound of a key in the lock. Mia had apparently forgotten to give David her key back, or maybe she'd kept it hoping she could still salvage the situation. The door opened and Mia walked in talking before she'd even looked around. "David, I know you're angry, but I think if we just sit down and talk about this like adults, we can figure out..." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me sitting on her couch in her apartment, surrounded by my moving boxes. The look on her face was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. Shock, recognition, rage, and the dawning realization that she'd been completely outplayed, all rolled into one perfect moment of devastation. "What the fuck is she doing here?" Mia's voice was shrill, all pretense of being the reasonable adult completely abandoned. "She's my new roommate," David said calmly. "I told you I was getting a replacement. Meet your replacement." I waved from the couch, probably looking way too pleased with myself. "Hey Mia, thanks for telling me about this place. It's exactly as amazing as you said it would be." The silence that followed was beautiful. I could practically see Mia's brain working frantically, trying to process what was happening and figure out how to regain some kind of advantage. But there was no advantage to be had. She'd lost everything, and we both knew it. "You manipulative bitch," she finally said, her voice shaking with rage. "You planned this whole thing." "I planned to tell David the truth about what you were doing behind his back," I corrected. "Everything else just worked out really well for everyone except you and Jake. You ruined my life." "No, sweetie. You ruined your own life when you decided to fuck my boyfriend while pretending to be my best friend. I just made sure there were consequences." Mia looked around the apartment, the exposed brick walls she'd been fantasizing about, the kitchen where she'd planned to host dinner parties, the bedroom where she'd imagined building a life with David. All of it was mine now, and the knowledge was written all over her face. "This is insane," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. She was deflating, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. You can't just steal my apartment. It was never your apartment," David said quietly. "My name is on the lease. I put down the deposit, and I choose who I want to live with. And he chooses someone who won't cheat on him," I added helpfully. Mia's eyes filled with tears, but they looked more like tears of rage and frustration than genuine sadness. She'd been caught, outmaneuvered, and now she was facing the consequences of her actions for what was probably the first time in her life. "I hope you're happy," she said, trying for dignity but mostly just sounding defeated. "You know what? I really am." I leaned back into the couch cushions, spreading my arms along the back like I was claiming my territory. "This place is incredible. David is great company, and I'm finally free of people who lie to me. So yeah, I'm pretty fucking happy." Mia gathered what little dignity she had left and walked toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle, probably hoping for some last-minute reversal or moment of doubt from David. But he was done with her, and it showed in every line of his posture. "Your key?" he said, holding out his hand. She slammed it into his palm and stormed out, leaving behind the scent of her expensive perfume and the echo of her footsteps on the stairs. David and I sat in silence for a moment, listening to her car start up and drive away. "Well," I said finally, "that went better than expected." David laughed. Really laughed, for the first time since I'd shown him those photos. "I can't believe she called you manipulative." The irony is incredible. The best part is that she's probably going straight to Jake's place to have a complete meltdown, and they're going to realize they have nothing in common except their mutual talent for betrayal. I stretched my legs out on the coffee table. Give it 2 weeks and they'll be sick of each other. You think? I know. Relationships built on deception don't have solid foundations. They were exciting to each other because they were forbidden and secret. Now that they're both single and available, all they'll have left is the reality of who they actually are. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. I glanced at it and started laughing. "What?" David asked. "Jake just texted asking if we can meet up to talk. He says Mia told him some crazy story about me moving in with her ex-boyfriend, and he wants to hear my side of things. Are you going to respond?" I looked around the apartment, our apartment now, taking in the late afternoon light streaming through those huge windows, the stack of takeout menus David had left on the counter for us to explore, the sense of possibility that hung in the air like incense. "Nope," I said, deleting the message. "I'm exactly where I want to be." 3 months later, I'm sitting on the rooftop garden of what used to be Mia's dream apartment, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and orange, and I can honestly say I've never felt more at peace with a decision in my entire life. The evening air is warm against my skin, and there's this sense of completeness that I didn't even realize I'd been missing before all this happened. It's not just about the revenge, though I'd be lying if I said watching everything unfold exactly as I'd predicted wasn't deeply satisfying. It's about the fact that I finally understand what it feels like to have agency in my own life. David's footsteps on the stairs interrupt my thoughts, and he appears with 2 glasses of wine and that easy smile that's become such a comfortable part of my daily routine. We've settled into this surprisingly natural rhythm as roommates. He's neat, but not obsessive, funny without trying too hard, and considerate in ways that make me realize how much I'd been settling for with Jake. "Cheers to surviving another week," he says, handing me a glass, "and to excellent revenge plots that keep on giving." He's referring to the latest development in the Mia and Jake saga, which reached us through the gossip network earlier today. Apparently they've broken up. Again, for the 3rd time in 2 months. Turns out when you build a relationship on betraying other people, trust doesn't come naturally to either party. Who could have seen that coming? The first breakup happened about 2 weeks after our apartment confrontation. From what I heard through mutual friends, Jake had accused Mia of manipulating him into cheating, while Mia had accused Jake of being a coward who couldn't take responsibility for his own actions. They'd reconciled within days, probably bonding over their shared victimhood and blaming me for destroying their lives, or whatever narrative helped them sleep at night. The second breakup was more dramatic. Jake apparently found texts on Mia's phone from some guy she'd met at a bar, nothing explicit, but flirty enough to trigger his paranoia. Mia, meanwhile, had discovered that Jake had been sliding into other women's DMs on Instagram. Each of them had responded to the other's sketchy behavior with outrage, as if they hadn't literally met while cheating on other people. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "I almost feel bad for them," I tell David, settling back into my chair. "Almost." "Almost?" He raises an eyebrow. "Okay, no, I don't feel bad for them at all. They're getting exactly what they deserve, a relationship built on the same foundation of lies and selfishness that they used to destroy ours. The truth is, watching their relationship implode has been better entertainment than anything Netflix has produced lately. Every update from friends has been like getting a progress report on a particularly satisfying social experiment. They can't trust each other because they know exactly how willing the other person is to betray someone they claim to love. They can't be honest with each other because their entire relationship started with deception. And they can't build anything stable together because they're both fundamentally selfish people who prioritize their own immediate gratification over everything else. Meanwhile, David and I have built something I never expected, a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared experience. We've been through something together, survived it, and come out stronger on the other side. There's something powerful about that kind of bond. You know what's funny? David says, looking out over the city lights that are starting to twinkle to life. I'm actually grateful this happened. Grateful? For the betrayal? Not for the betrayal itself, he clarifies, but for finding out who Mia really was before I made an even bigger mistake. Like marrying her or having kids with her. For getting out before I was in so deep I couldn't see clearly. I know exactly what he means. The version of myself that was dating Jake feels like a different person now. Someone smaller, more anxious, constantly seeking validation from people who didn't deserve the power I was giving them. I'd been so focused on being the perfect girlfriend and perfect friend that I'd lost track of what I actually wanted from my life. This whole experience has taught me that I'm capable of things I never would have imagined. Strategic thinking, patient planning, the kind of cold calculation that most people associate with villains in movies. But I don't feel like a villain. I feel like someone who finally learned how to protect herself. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just confronted them directly? David asks. Like called them out, had a big dramatic scene, and walked away? I think about it sometimes. But honestly, I think they would have found a way to make it my fault. Mia especially. She's so good at playing the victim and making other people feel crazy for questioning her. This way, they couldn't deny what they'd done or spin it into some story about misunderstandings. The evidence was too clear, the consequences too immediate. My phone buzzes with a text, and I glance at it without thinking. Jake's name still makes my stomach clench slightly, but it's more like muscle memory now than actual emotional response. The message is predictably pathetic, something about missing me and realizing he made a mistake. I show the screen to David, who snorts with laughter. He's been sending these for weeks, I tell him. Always right after he and Mia break up, like clockwork. It's almost insulting how predictable he is. He wants the stability he had with you, but he also wants the excitement he thought he had with her. He doesn't understand that he can't have both, especially not from the same person he already betrayed. I delete the message without responding, same as always. Jake had his chance to be honest with me, to respect our relationship, to treat me like someone whose feelings mattered. He chose differently, repeatedly over months. The person who sends these messages isn't someone who's genuinely sorry. He's someone who misses the convenience of having a girlfriend who trusted him completely. The sun has almost completely set now, and the city is transforming into its nighttime version. From up here, everything looks peaceful and organized, like all the chaos and drama of people's individual lives gets smoothed out into patterns of light and shadow. I think I'm ready to start dating again, David says suddenly. Yeah? Anyone in mind? Maybe. There's this woman at work who's been asking if I want to grab coffee. She seems nice, normal. Definitely not a sociopath. High bar, I tease, but a necessary one. We sit in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. I'm thinking about how much has changed since that night 3 months ago when I discovered the truth about Jake and Mia. Not just the external changes, the new apartment, the new roommate, the spectacular revenge, but the internal ones. I trust my instincts now in ways I never did before. When something feels off, I pay attention instead of talking myself out of it. When someone's actions don't match their words, I believe the actions. When people show me who they really are, I listen. Most importantly, I've learned that I don't need to be endlessly understanding and forgiving to be a good person. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to let people experience the natural consequences of their choices. Mia and Jake weren't going to learn anything from my pain if I'd just absorbed it silently and moved on. But losing their relationships, their living situation, their social credibility, that taught them something, even if it wasn't the lesson they wanted to learn. You know what the best part is? I tell David as we start gathering our glasses to head inside. The best part isn't even the revenge. It's not? No. I look around the rooftop one more time, taking in the space that represents everything I've gained from this experience. The best part is that I like who I became through all of this. I like being someone who doesn't accept betrayal quietly. I like being someone who's strategic and patient and willing to fight for herself. I like being someone who can turn a devastating situation into an opportunity for something better. David grins. Plus, you got an amazing apartment out of it. Plus, I got an amazing apartment out of it. I agree. And an amazing roommate. As we head back downstairs to our beautiful, perfectly located, completely deserved apartment, I catch my reflection in the window and barely recognize the person looking back at me. She looks confident, settled, like someone who knows exactly where she belongs and how she got there. She looks like someone who's learned that the best revenge isn't just getting even, it's becoming the kind of person who would never accept less than she deserves in the first place. My phone buzzes again. Another message from Jake that I'll delete without reading. But for the first time in months, I realize I don't feel anything when I see his name. Not anger, not hurt, not even satisfaction. Just complete indifference, which is probably the most devastating response of all. I'm done looking backward. I've got a rooftop garden to enjoy, a friendship to appreciate, and a life to build that's entirely my own.